Hey, welcome to the KidBuilderZ how-to video for solar-powered cars. In this video, we're going to build a solar-powered car in 3 easy steps. In the first step, we're going to need 6 parts. We're going to need a Sharpie, our car body, 4 plastic bushings, 1 gear axle, 2 axles, 2 front tires, and 2 rear tires. The first thing we do in step 1 is write our name on the KidBuilder sticker on the bottom of the body. In this way we can be sure that the cars won't get mixed up later. The second thing we do is take the car body and insert the plastic bushings. The plastic bushings get inserted into the side of the car body 2 full holes back from the front and rear. 1 in one side, 1 in the other. Turn it around to the other end of the car, count 2 holes back, 1, 2, and insert your plastic bushing on both sides. Once the plastic bushings are in, we're ready to prepare the axle for insertion. The rear axle is going to have a drive gear attached to it. So the first thing we do is attach the drive gear to one of the axles. To do this, we simply insert the axle into the center hole of the drive gear, then place it on the table, holding the gear with our fingers and thumbs, rock the gear back and forth while putting a downward pressure on the gear. Eventually the gear will be completely on the axle, and you want to leave 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch of axle sticking out past the gear. Next, we'll put one of the rear wheels on the outside of the gear by simply pressing it on and pressing it down until it meets up with the gear. Now we can take this axle and gear assembly, stick it into one of the bushings, push it through the car body, and gently out the other side bushing. Taking the second rear wheel, we put it onto the axle, push down until snug against the car body, and then to ensure that the car works properly, make sure that the car body and the axle can spin freely without rubbing. If it's too tight against the bushings, simply pull it open a little bit and leave a little bit of space on each bushing so that the wheels can spin smooth. Now we're ready for the front wheels. Take the second axle and the front wheels, put the wheel onto the axle, put it on the table, push down firmly. Take the axle and single wheel, put it through the plastic bushings. Be sure to have the sticker on the bottom of the car. Take the second wheel, put it onto the axle. Now, simply open your fingers and thumbs, grab both wheels and push them together until tight. Sometimes the kiddos won't be able to get the wheels quite tight enough, so after this step, it's best if you go around and make sure each set of wheels is tightened onto the front of the body. You should leave a tiny bit of axle showing, and it should be just a little bit loose on the body like that. And that's the end of step 1. Now we'll move on to step 2 of building the solar car. For step 2, we need 5 parts. The body assembly we built before, the pinion gear that goes onto the motor bracket, the motor, and again a Sharpie. The first thing we do in step 2 is take the pinion gear and mount it on the motor shaft. We do this by simply sliding the pinion gear onto the shaft. It will likely be tight. Putting the pinion gear down on the table and pressing down with our thumbs until the pinion gear is all the way on to the motor shaft. The shaft of the motor should be right flush with the outside of the pinion gear. Now we're ready to take the motor mount and put the motor inside of it. If we put the motor mount down on the table, we can simply push down with the motor and it will snap into the mount. This still allows us to move the motor back and forth or spin it around. One thing that we want to do is spin the motor around so that the electrical connections are vertical in the motor mount. This will make it much easier to connect the solar panel in the next step. Now, we're ready to put the motor mount onto the car. This is a critical step in that we want the two gears, the pinion gear and the axle gear, to mesh nicely when we're driving. So we want to find the proper place to mount the motor. Using the Sharpie, we make a line on the back where we want to mount the motor. This allows us to test some different motor mounting locations until we find just the right one. Now, take the motor mount and peel off the paper to reveal the sticky part of the motor mount. Now that we have the line, we can simply line up the motor mount with the line we had before, press down firmly, and now we've mounted our motor. And we're done with step 2. And now we're ready for step 3, the final step in building a solar powered car. In the final step, we'll need 2 pieces: the car body and motor assembly, which we built in step 2, and a solar panel with 2 alligator clips that we want to now mount onto the car body. To mount the solar panel, we first turn it over. We put a small piece of 2-sided tape up near the top of the solar panel, near where the wires come out of the top of the panel. Then we simply take the tape and pull off the protective strip, and now we want to apply the solar panel, matching the tape up with the top of the motor in such a way that the solar panel will hover roughly around the center of the car and be angled down toward the front axle, just like so. Then we simply want to connect the 2 alligator clips to the motor, electrical motor mounts sticking out from the motor. Now we want to do this in a certain manner such that we hide all the cord underneath the solar panel. This allows the car to move freely without any friction. So we take the wires, we tuck them underneath, and then we mount the clips onto the electrical posts. Now you might be thinking, where does the red clip go and where does the black clip go? Well, upon first installation, it doesn't really matter. If they're backwards, the car will simply go in reverse. If they're connected to the right poles, the car will go forward. So if you first put it together and it goes backwards, simply take the alligator clips off, switch the poles that you're attached to, and then the car should go forward. Now we're done with our solar car and we can go out and play with it. Okay, we're ready with our solar car and we've got some really nice bright sunlight. So let's put it on the ground and see which way it goes. Slight push. This car is wired backwards. We need to switch the wires onto the other poles in order for it to go forwards. You simply pick up the car, take the 2 alligator clips off, noting which ones they were hooked to before, and switch them. It's a simple switch, and in fact the kids get a real kick out of the car going backwards. Now our car should go forward. We put it on the ground, give it a slight push, and away it goes. Solar powered car. There are a few common mistakes that can happen with the solar powered car. The number 1 most common mistake is either cloud cover that prevents us from having enough sun to really drive the car, or the shadow. You'd be amazed at how many kids will bend down to start their solar car and their shadow will be right over the solar panel. Simply moving off center, giving a small push, will allow the car to go. The car can then be stopped by putting a shadow over the top of it. Let's go in and look at some of the more common mistakes that can be made during the build process. Now that we've built a successful solar-powered car, let's take a look at a few more common mistakes that can prevent the car from working well. A couple of the most common mistakes are: one, not having the wires tucked in and out of the way. If you wire the car and you have one of your wire clips out, or even a wire rubbing against the wheel on occasion, it'll be just enough friction to possibly keep the car from working. So remember, be sure to tuck the wires in underneath the solar panel so that they're out of the way of all the wheels and gears. Another common problem is if a gear has a small burr on one of the tines. When meshing with the drive gear, this will cause the gears to bind and possibly stop the car. If you have a car that goes a few inches and then stops every time, look for a gear with a bind on it. Take a small X-Acto knife or pair of scissors, or even sometimes just your fingernail, and scrape off the burr. Last but not least is occasionally the motor gets mounted either too far back, too far forward, or possibly at an angle to the rear axle gear, causing a imperfect mesh between the pinion gear and the axle gear. In this case, again, you will be causing too much friction and stress, and occasionally the gears will bind and the car will stop. So simply pull the motor off of the body, make sure you have a nice clean mesh, which can be tested by rolling the car on a tabletop, and then reassemble the motor and the solar panel. Now that we've built some really cool solar cars, let's talk about a quick experiment and learning opportunity for the kids. We want to look at how we can measure speed of the solar car over a 15-foot span. What we do is we take some duct tape and we peel out about 3-foot long sections of duct tape. And we place them on the ground parallel to each other, each 3-foot long section exactly 5 feet from the one prior to it. So we have a 5-foot section, a starting line, a 5-foot marker, 10-foot marker, and a 15-foot marker. Now set up 3 kids with stopwatches at each of the lines and have somebody start their car at the starting line, measuring the time in seconds for the car to cross the 5-foot line, the 10-foot line, and the 15-foot line. Record these times on the worksheet, and after all the cars have gone through the timing process, you can sit down with the students and calculate their speed. In this way, the students can learn how we measure speed in feet per second. In closing, thanks a lot for watching this video, and have fun building solar-powered cars with your kids.